Hi folks, welcome to the iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. I've got Stuart Lockhead and Jimmy Hutton with me today. The Nicola Sturgeon's press conference was fairly interesting today, so we're going to spend a bit of time with that. Obviously that'll lead us into discussion of the law and lockdown. And we're going to finish up with Jackson Carlaw being told he was talking a lot of pish by Ross Greer of the Greens. The presser, Stuart.
Well, I think it was her best presser for ages. She laid down the law, did the First Minister. She was having took no prisoners. She signalled, signposted that over the weekend by tweeting. She does a bit of tweeting, nothing like President Trump, of course, but you can tell where her thinking is. So she was not happy about hearing about Loch Lomond being overrun. The villagers in Luss apparently were staying indoors because they were overrun by visitors. I don't know where to start. I think there are issues. She threatened to use the law, in other words, to reverse the easing of the lockdown, because she was asked about it by the press. But she also introduced it without being asked any questions. She said that Glencoe, there were 3 times the traffic of last week going through Glencoe, 70% up at beauty spots, particularly mentioned tents, caravans and motorhomes.
Well, the big thing on social media from the independent, well, shall we say the more extreme edge of the independence movement is getting some sort of checks on the borders, not having our brothers and sisters in England traipsing up here with the coronavirus. She'll never do that. She'll never shut the border.
I mean, can I just throw this in because it's relevant, because I get this news from the Highlands every day. As far as the Highlanders are concerned, they're just as concerned about people coming up from Glasgow and Edinburgh in their motorhomes as they are about the English.
Exactly. We can't be blaming the English for this one. This has been mostly Scots. This has been particularly when you look at Loch Lomond, it's mostly wages.
Loch Lomond does.
The 82 was rammed, and what we've seen was ridiculous scenes. Parked cars on both sides of the roads, making the roads impassable. There's a reason that the bloody car parks are shut. They don't want people travelling. And folk are just completely disregarding that.
I mean, they were obviously looking for the quote that they got, which was, if you don't do as you're being asked to do, as the recommendation is, we'll turn it into a law.
Mm-hmm. And she was even asked, how long would it take you to turn it into law? And she made it clear, well, she didn't say it was overnight, but she doesn't have to wait for anything.
No, the question was around, will you wait for 3 weeks till the next review?
She did outline, she outlined some tests that she would look at before she would change it. But no, she was keeping her powder dry, ready.
I think we've said this before, though, that there needs to be serious consideration to ramping up the fines, so that, because there are repeat offenders out there. There are people who consider themselves above the law, and there are people who are using Dominic Cummings as an excuse to be bawbags. So if you're going to be a repeat bawbag, treble the fine each time. If it starts at 100 quid, put it to 300 quid, then £1,000.
I've always thought that the system of fines is ridiculous. It should be a percentage of your income.
Well, that's another story. But
there's weird hoops they have to jump through about the European Convention on Human Rights as to how much they can fine people in that. But I think they need to clamp down, mate, because some of the scenes that I've seen were just disgusting. The fact that they tell you 5 hours, the fact that they mentioned if you're going to need to use the loo, don't go that far. And then you've got people taking a dump in bushes or at the side of a road just so they can get out and have a bit of sunshine. What kind of ass does that? Seriously.
Well, look, can I just throw in a fact that perhaps the authorities, I'm not in favour of authorities, to be honest, a bit of an anarchist inside, but what they did in France, they could have threatened to do what they did in France. what they did with the lockdown in France was before you could go out your house, you had to fill in a form, which you had to download and print off or get it from your corner shop. And you had to fill in where you were going, why were you going, when you were going, and carry it with you. And if you obviously, if you were breaking the rules, you could then be fined. Can you imagine having that in this country?
You
But
wouldn't get people to comply in this country.
Well,
They
why?
would just,
I was just about to say that. Ask that question, Jimmy. But why not? What's the difference between Scotland and France?
in France, people have got centuries tradition of being downtrodden. They carry official documents with them at all times because they expect to get pulled.
Okay.
We've never done that here, so you're not going to get people overnight to do so.
Generally speaking, what you said was all right, but the very first line was wrong. You're trying to say that us and Scots are not downtrodden.
No, I didn't think we are. I don't think the British people are downtrodden, mate. When have we ever had to carry identification to let the authorities know who we are?
Yeah.
We're all British at that point. The Brits never carry identification.
Well, can I just give you a few quotes then before we move on further in this issue? The First Minister, she said that she could change direction in a heartbeat, in a day. She said that being in charge of this lockdown, she didn't detail it, but being in charge, it's not a popularity contest. We will consider any action. And then they made the point that the rule breakers, the people that are flouting the rules, not only are they threatening people by the spread of the return of the virus and killing people, they're threatening the status of the lockdown being eased. In other words, it's having all these parties and these beach visits and all the rest of it. That could cause the lockdown to be imposed again. It'd be their fault, not ours.
Well, that's been a mainstay of her arguments for a long time.
I think she had to use that language today purely because if it works, then it's a massive differentiating factor between us and the rest of the country. Because lockdown's finished in England. It's just finished. There's no hint of a lockdown down there. You've got shielded groups being told to come out. You've got schools back. You've got horse racing started. You've got football starting in a couple of weeks. Lockdown's over as far as Britain's concerned, as far as England is concerned, and Wales will follow them. But if she can stomp on this weekend's hilarity, then she shows a massive differentiation between the Scots and the rest of the UK.
Which kind of brings me to the point about Rees-Mogg opening up Parliament. Apparently, the line that's going to be necessary for people to vote, well, they're not going to go through the lobbies. They're going to split left and right of the chair in the actual chamber to be counted for their votes. But it's going to be 1 kilometre long.
How long is that going to be? Slow enough as it is. Why didn't they just press a button like anywhere else?
And that is playing politics. Rees-Mogg wants you in the chamber so that he can say, the government has ceased lockdown and we're still a democracy and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. The irony being that they're in the process of agreeing a system for the House of Lords to sit virtually.
Yeah, well, there you go. Can I just bring in a personal issue here? I'm not officially shielded. However, I am I've got heart disease, I've got lung disease, I'm 74, and I'm scared, to be honest. But I got no privileges of being shielded, but on the other hand, So she was asked by Tom Eden. This was a journalist that she forgot to allow questions. Well, mistakenly, he didn't get his questions on Saturday, so he got 2 questions a day. He wasn't any cleverer. And he asked the question, well, the shielded group is being allowed a bit more relaxation in England. What's happening in Scotland? And she said, well, go and ask them. I haven't changed.
Yeah, our point was that you should be asking the English why they've done it.
Exactly. Don't ask me. I haven't changed anything.
Sorry, we shouldn't conflate the English with the government they've got.
Well, what's happening in
the
England?
Westminster government, why they've chosen to change their their methodology.
Well, Norway, it's incredible that they managed to come up with this 4-stage easing of lockdown, and they only announced it, well, maybe a week or two ago, and we've gone from stage 4 to about stage 2 without ever being in stage 3 in England. It's a waste of time printing up all that stuff up, making all the graphs up, because they're just ignoring their own rules.
But
well, you know
it's
why?
about playing the public.
Aye, well,
It's
this is
about creating a situation where the public think they're doing what they said they were going to do.
well,
Where
it's
they're
not
not in
just it's a
fact doing that.
popularity. It's a popularity thing. They want to deflect from all the row about Dominic Cummings and by saying, "Oh, we're letting you do all this, that, and the next thing. Nice government now, eh?"
Well, that brings me back to the my hobby horse about we're now at a very dangerous stage in our democracy, because they're going to say they're going to do it more politely, and a little more thought will go into it than with Trump. But they're going to do exactly what they want. Exactly what they want. And Dominic Cummings is the proof of that. It doesn't matter. If it turns out Dominic Cummings had been up to Durham every day of the week for a year, right from before lockdown right through it, he will still not move. He will still be there, because he is the real Prime Minister.
Well, look, can I just point, you're so right. Do you remember that quote that Donald Trump claimed that because he's got his base, his followers will forgive him anything? He said he could shoot somebody. He could shoot somebody dead on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Well, apparently, Dominic Cummings supporters have said more or less the same. He can do what what does he have to do to be fired? Well, there's nothing he can do. He'll never get fired, not until they finish Brexit at the end of this year.
Well, I said exactly the same thing when this first broke, that Cummings can do exactly what he wants. And the problem with that is it makes the elected representatives of our government believe they can do exactly what they want. And the way Parliament's acting at the moment, they're doing exactly what suits them to get.
It does beg the question why we are considering going along with it for much longer. I mean, they're going to choke off the funding for furlough in October, guaranteed.
Well, that was you probably missed that bit, because that was almost right at the very end. The First Minister was asked about that at the press conference. What's the situation? What if Scotland needed to go back into lockdown? And the question of and she said that she would be negotiating for funding. She said she'd be looking for the money from the Treasury.
They were still negotiating, and she wanted the power. If they weren't prepared to support, she wanted the power to borrow the money to do it.
Nicely put, Norrie.
That's effectively what she said. The other big issue, which is going to run and run, is the care home issue. And it's going to run and run because it's going to be as clear as mud. I had a wee contretemps with a guy on Twitter today who is looking for somebody to blame. That because people died, somebody has to be blamed. Now, it might well be the fact that the coronavirus didn't enter care homes through people who came from hospitals. It might have come from the staff. Very difficult to prove either way. It might be a case of bad management when it came to the isolation in care homes. Very difficult to prove. And as I said earlier, this guy Banks has already got his retaliation in.
Retaliation for what?
Well, let's wait and see. He's got it in. I think he knows full well.
Yeah, but who is he?
There's going to be blame laid squarely at the owners of some, and I emphasize this, some care homes.
Yep. So who is he?
He owns care homes. What did you say, Jimmy? He's on 900,000 a year or something?
Aye, he pays himself 900 grand a year. He's chief executive of Balhousie Care Group, which I believe they have a shed load of care homes around the country. And that care group they're so kind and considerate and caring that they added 300 quid a month to people's bills at the start of April this year. Nice to price gouge in the middle of an epidemic. Kind of gives you a wee insight into what kind of money is.
That's a serious, serious hike.
So what's he accusing the government, Scottish government of?
He's
being ineffectual, not helping them out enough, not particularly his attack yesterday was all based around testing. He was saying that testing wasn't available for care homes. The staff should have been tested. The punters should have been, everybody should have been tested, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic. And he can come out with something like that, because there's no real comeback to that, other than the fact that, Mr. Banks, you have no idea how our testing system works. You have no idea how we had to ramp up the testing from the position it was at March. And you absolutely have no idea how much all of that would have cost. And if we had managed to do all that in the click of our fingers, like you were asking, you'd still find something to complain about.
It's a smokescreen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it's a smokescreen.
This spat I had on Twitter, well, it wasn't really a spat, but the guy's looking for heads to roll. The only way this will work effectively is if they go for a no-blame inquiry.
Yeah.
The government can admit they got things wrong. Care homes can admit they got things wrong.
Well, look,
sent out letters can admit they got things wrong.
Right,
and
so
make sure it doesn't happen again.
Look, it was the Sun reporter that brought up the question at the press conference today, this guy, Tony Banks. Now, it was a 1-2 from the First Minister and the Health Secretary. Cool. Both barrels. The First Minister, as usual, she's so good with her words. I've never pointed my finger at any particular sector as far as the care homes, she didn't use the word scandal, issue is concerned. And that's all she said. She just didn't attack Mr. Banks at all. On the other hand, Jean Freeman, the Health Secretary, she said, I speak regularly to Mr. McCaskill, who represents all the private care homes. And then she came out with, well, she said, I think Mr. Banks is conflating the pandemic and the possibility that privatized care homes might be, well, she didn't use the term nationalized, but she said they were up for review. That brings it back to your point, Norrie.
Right. Jimmy.
Well, he's protecting his investment. The problem is, the media, I don't think, will allow a no-fault inquiry into this, Norrie, because they've tried desperately for a while. They're desperate to try and find anything to blame the Scottish Government for, because their agenda is to make sure the SNP don't massively win next year's election.
Their agenda is to bring down the Scottish Government.
It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. Can I tell you why? Because this is an issue that has not been raised today. I've raised it before, and it's something I've done a lot of studying of. It's called asymptomatic testing. Asymptomatic infected. It turns out that all the evidence says that people are passing on the virus before they have any symptoms. So if you're passing on the virus without any symptoms, how can they test people before they go into care homes?
Exactly. It's a nonsense, mate, but the media desperately need to hang something on the Scottish Government, because their owners, their paymasters want the SNP not to lose next year's election, because that's pretty much improbable, really, by now. But they desperately can't have them win, and have them win big, because that brings about the constitutional debate that we all want, and that brings about the constitutional change that we all desire, because the media are owned by people who are anti-Scottish independence.
To look at it from a political point of view, it's going to be really interesting, because if in Scotland the only thing they can hang on the SNP is some bullshit about not taking charge of, not nationalising care homes right at the beginning, which effectively, I mean, what else can they say? Mm-hmm. You know, you should have taken all this under the wing of the Scottish Government instead of leaving it to private care home owners or local health boards.
Aye, cheerfully, give us a power.
You know, but if that's what's said in Scotland, and it's not said south of the border, because every
Aye.
single government in the UK, with the possible exception of Northern Ireland, but Wales, England, and Scotland especially, have had a problem in their care homes. So each one is run by a different political party. It's going to be interesting to see what the fallout is within the devolved administrations, especially when Jackson Carlaw gets up and says, care homes, and Gene Freeman gets up and says, English care homes.
Yeah, and also when the Office for National Statistics take a closer look at their figures and say, by the way, England has been underreporting deaths in care homes, there's still a considerable number of thousand deaths that are unattributed within English care homes. And what are they going to say? Did these people all drop? Did a heat stroke?
That's why the Westminster government are getting away with it, because nobody is asking them to identify the cause of those deaths, those excess deaths.
Yeah, and Norrie, they also got away with this. Could have, and see, I don't want to sound too much like a ought to be wearing a tinfoil bonnet. But why is it the case that people in English care homes, well, people in care homes in general, the way that their deaths are recorded was changed at the start of this pandemic? Effectively, if a doctor had spoken to somebody, like we're speaking now through Zoom in the last 4 weeks, he could certify that person's death as being, he can now certify that person's death as being anything he wants. And it certainly doesn't have to put COVID on the death certificate.
But you know,
and by the way, it doesn't need a second doctor's signature, and they don't need pathology reports to confirm anything. That all changed at the start of this epidemic.
It's simpler than that, Jimmy. It's actually simpler than that. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson himself, said that the only international data that he would be prepared to accept a comparison with was excess deaths. In other words, the total amounts of deaths more above the average for the last 5 years. Now, if you look at those figures, care home deaths, total deaths, the entire thing puts England the worst in the world, and the UK the second worst in the world. You know, the Prime Minister has said it himself. He can't deny what he said.
By going along with that, you're giving Boris Johnson the power to make his own judgment, and therefore he also has the power to change which stats he's willing to accept.
Yeah, but he can't reject international comparison of excess deaths.
He can. You're giving him the power that excess deaths is the only one by which he should be judged. Therefore, he can change it at any point in time just by saying that he changes it.
The excess deaths is an international standard. That's the point.
It's not. It's not. Who records excess deaths in England? The English government. They can actually put that as to whatever they bloody well like.
No, wait a minute. Let me discuss death certificates. Point of fact here. People in old folks' homes do not die in front of doctors if they die in the old folks' home.
Yeah, but I'm not saying.
Wait a minute.
I'm not talking about anything. I'm not talking about what's on the death certificate. Simply the number of dead in any country.
Yes, Stuart, but Jimmy, you're talking about who controls what goes on a death certificate.
Well, yeah, I know.
I'd like to explain to you how it works. Is that okay?
Yeah, I've heard this many times.
Somebody dies in a care home. Okay, you tell me what I'm going to say.
Oh, listen.
You've heard it. Fuck's sake. Somebody dies.
Calm down, gentlemen.
Somebody dies in a care home. Their family are usually there, and there will be, normally, if it's a nursing home, a nurse. The person dies, the doctor's informed, the doctor comes in the morning and says to the nurse, was it her chest? Was it her heart? What do you think it was? And that's what goes on the death certificate. Doctor doesn't go to a morgue for a pathology report, nothing. If you're 90 plus years old and you die, the doctor puts something on the death certificate.
Yeah, but particularly in this pandemic, mate, pathology should have been more important rather than less. Just because it's a new disease, and there are. Stuart, you posted a fantastic thing the other day about how different complications were appearing, and how we're learning more, it seems to be that it's more a disease of the blood than a disease of the lungs. So the pathology should have been more important, not less.
It's blood clots.
I don't see any reason that a swab can't be taken after death.
Yeah, but unfortunately, mate, they're not. I read a thing, and of all places, The Spectator, with a pathologist who is chronically underworked at the moment in the middle of a pandemic, and he's disgusted by that fact.
Well,
and the boy was a bit of a right-winger for me, but it was an interesting article, to say the least.
The point I was going to make is the only reason I could see for a government not to want that to happen is that they don't want the real figures being publicised.
Yeah. Well, I think in general, Norrie, it's always annoyed me anyway that you watch the briefing at 12:30 in Scotland, and you watch the UK one at tea time, and the obfuscation in figures from the start has been incredible. You know, you get one day you get figures for England, the next day you get figures for England and Wales. Getting figures for all four separate parts of the UK and the UK has proved almost impossible, and the only reason for that is to deliberately muddy the waters.
Well, that, I don't know if you remember, I sent you a link.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that, is that the Scottish figures?
Yeah, if you give me a minute.
It looked very comprehensive.
Aye, it is, it's cracking.
I think you should put it with the show, put it on the website.
I can't put it on the background, but I can. I'll put the link up. New daily death comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
So, where are we?
It's very comprehensive. I'm not sure which one you want to put up. I spent about
England,
half an hour.
310, Scotland 22, day 66. So it's very comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that there's somebody out there doing that, mate, because as I say, I think the UK government have been deliberately trying to muddy the waters and deliberately trying to make things difficult to find.
I mean, it's headlined Scotland. It's done by a guy in Scotland. In fact, I can probably tell you because I think he's so comprehensive about it. I
think it's more than one person. Must be a department, academic department, I think.
Website not associated with the Scottish Government, UK Government, NHS, or any other organisation that is run by an individual as a hobby.
Wow.
Good on him.
That's a lot of work.
Me, a guy called John.
Well.
25-year-old student and cat lover at the University of Highlands and Islands. I started tracking the coronavirus COVID-19 data in a spreadsheet out of interest, which eventually led to the web page.
Well, can I just say, John's a good guy. John's one of the good guys.
I think he'll get offered a few jobs after this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's very comprehensive.
Excellent. I'll have a wee butcher's hook at that this afternoon.
I'll send you a link.
I'll go out to play in the sunshine for half an hour.
I'll put the link on the website as well.
Right, can we laugh at Jackson Carlaw now?
Aye, okay.
Splendid.
So Jackson Carlaw said something that was really stupid, but he says so much that's really stupid, I can't remember what this particular thing was.
He implied that the Scottish Parliament was working to suit the SNP agenda and that it was only sitting one day a week. At which point, young Mr. Greer from the Green Party pointed out to him that he'd done, I think, about 4 committees. He'd sat on 4 committees last week, including a 7.5-hour sitting, and told Jackson Carlaw that he was talking a load of pish.
Literally?
Yes.
It's actually a quote.
Yes, he actually said, "You're talking a lot of pish." And Twitter went, well, the Twitter Tories took rather offence to this and were disgusted by the unparliamentary language and what have you. Not one of them, by the way, in any of their answers or any of their attacking at Ross Greer, made any mention whatsoever to Ross Greer's point that Jackson Carlaw was lying about the operations of the Scottish Parliament. Not a one. But you had donuts like Murdo's the one that particularly gets me. Murdo was going on about unparliamentary language and how we should raise the bar. I'm sorry, he's a Rangers fan, as you know I am, but Murdo sits at Ibrox every couple of weeks singing the battle hymns of the 19th century bigots, and he wants to have a go at Ross Greer about language.
Well, hold on a minute, Jimmy. Isn't Murdo Fraser the man who's lost nine elections?
Aye, I believe he has lost 9 times, mate, and he still manages to squat in our parliament through the vagaries of the D'Hondt system.
He's a supporter of the Queen's 11, if I remember correct.
Aye, yes, mate. He's a Rangers man. Sorry, I struggle to get that out there. But some of the stuff he sings along to is far worse than telling Jackson Carlaw he's talking a pile of pish. That's for sure.
It brings me back to the point I made earlier. Jackson Carlaw was one of those strange Tories, One Nation Tory types, who was always very polite, and every now and again he would give the First Minister a wee pat on the back for something. He was quite a genial guy, and he's turning into a Westminster Tory.
Oh, aye, he's definitely
had lies.
He's had a wee instruction book sent up to him by Dominic.
Outrageous, really is. It's not going to get better.
It's embarrassing, mate. And the thing is, as their poll numbers drop, he'll just get worse and worse. He's turning into a complete caricature of himself.
He's under a bit of pressure, and his role as leader at the moment as well. I don't think
I would Ruthie back in the limelight. And don't forget, I know it was a very small poll, but there was a poll the other week which had the Tories in Scotland at less than 10%.
Aye, I saw that. Aye. It's a shame. It's a shame that, as you say, it was a very small poll. If that had been a sample of 1,000 people, it'd been all over the papers, mate. Eh?
Was that the poll that had the SNP at 59?
Aye. And I believe the Greens were on 4% in that poll as well. So you were looking at 63% for the independence parties. And you can see, although it's a small poll, you can see why panic's set in. And they desperately need to land a blow, any blow, on the Scottish government at the moment.
Well, don't forget, they've got allies. They've got 14 journalists. Do you like my fingers? So-called journalists that asked questions of the First Minister today. And every single journalist and or the organisation they represent are infamous for the support of unionism, for the support of the British domination of Scotland. And our First Minister has to put up with that day in, day out.
There was clearly another tranche of funding released by the unionists at the weekend, because I didn't think Ian Murray and Neil Finlay of Neil, whatever his name is, big fat Neil that's retired. But I didn't think they've tweeted so much over a weekend ever. They must have got a nice big wad of cash and said, by the way, whatever you normally do on the weekend, don't do it. Get on your Twitter. And then we have the joys of Keir Starmer instructing us that he's going to bring about radical federalism in the UK this morning. What a horse he is, Bahuki.
A radical federalism.
Aye, it's not just federalism anymore, Norrie. It's going to be radical federalism.
It just shows you how ignorant he is down there.
Aye, exactly.
Did he step in one of Gordon Brown's shits?
He's done something like that, mate. Aye.
Radical federalism.
I'd love to be honest, I would love to see on paper what they consider radical federalism to be. Apart from anything else, my big stash of bog rolls running out, and I might need some of their radical federalism shortly.
I don't know. The unionist politicians must be absolutely crapping it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely crapping it. Because if the political theory that your party depends on the popularity of your leader, Nicola's going to wipe the board.
Aye. Aye, and as I say, mate, this year's just going to get worse and worse as they try to find anything. I mean, they've played their big card. They've had the Salmon case in court. They've played the big card that they had, and that's no worked. So now they're scrambling about looking for anything and everything to hit with. And it'll end up being all these wee ditties and sort of Youth for Independence and all that nonsense, all these wee half-wits that actually have no place in the party, but they're radical enough to say whatever they feel like they want to say on Twitter. It'll be one of them that ends up a front-page story.
Aye, they're going to have to be really careful with that one. Stuart, anything to finish with?
Not really. No, not now. I've fired my last shot for thinking about.
I've got a wee one just to finish up with. I just noticed that Spain's foreign minister has told UK citizens not to bother travelling to Spain this summer. They're not welcome. So that's us now barred for Greece and Spain. And I was just thinking how shit it is to be treated like an English football supporter, that you're barred for the continent.
Did he actually say not welcome?
Yes. It's a woman, and she said that British visitors will not be welcome in Spain this summer because of this. I mean, come on. Spain got hammered with the coronavirus, and they're keeping us out because they've managed to get a grip of it a hell of a lot better than we have.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, I do have one last word, guys, because I don't want anybody to forget about Dominic Cummings. Here we go.
Oh, we're going live, aren't we?
This is...
why don't we just call it what it is? Dominic Cummings is a liar who broke the rules. We know it. Everybody knows it. The BBC may shut down Emily Maitlis for saying it, but they're not going to shut us down from saying, or me. The guy broke every rule there is to break.
Well, particularly on that trip to Barnard Castle.
Sorry, on every part of this story.
He's not given up. I'll give him that.
Seriously, I do worry when I keep agreeing with Piers Morgan, though, because he's been a kind of hate figure for a long time.
It is a worrying condition, isn't it, Jimmy? I'm not sure where it's taking us.
The thing I really like to do is with these clips is watch his fellow presenter's face. You can see her kind of going, oh, God, no, we're going to get sued. We're going to get sued.
How do I shut this one down? How do I calm him down a wee bit?
Aye.
Well, I noticed, I suppose one last thing on yesterday we were talking about the international support for Craig Murray and what's his name, Hurst, the two Scottish journalists who've been charged. Yeah, been charged with contempt of court. One with contempt of court, and the other one with threatening behaviour on social media. They've now got over 2,000 signatures in Scotland in support, as well as the international support that they've got.
Nice.
It'll be very interesting to see how both of them play out.
It'll be very interesting to see if it ever makes it onto the BBC, that piece of news.
Well, aye, that's another thing altogether. We could actually every day just talk about how bad the press is in the UK at the moment.
Yeah.
I think there are better things to do, but yes, we could.
Okay, folks. Thank you for listening. Jimmy Hutton, Stuart Lockhead, thanks for being on the show. I'm Norris Stewart, and we'll no doubt catch up with you tomorrow, by which time I expect Parliament to be shut down and Boris to be king. Cheers for now.